My name is Maya, and for 3 years my husband convinced me that I was losing my mind. Every time I asked to see his phone, he'd laugh, kiss my forehead, and say, "You're being crazy again, Maya. You imagine things that don't exist." For a long time, I believed him. I believed that if I just loved him better, trusted him more, and stayed quiet, things would go back to how they were in the beginning. But instead, it only got worse. Until one night, one single recording proved that I was never crazy at all. It proved that he knew exactly what he was doing to me. This is the story of how I went from apologizing for everything to calmly watching him fall into the trap he created himself. When people looked at us from the outside, we were the perfect couple. We had a small but beautiful apartment, good jobs, and a 6-year-old son, Daniel, who thought his father was a superhero. My husband, Marcus, was charming. He knew everyone by name, remembered birthdays, and always smiled at neighbors in the hallway. At family dinners, he pulled my chair out, poured me wine, and told everyone, I don't know what I'd do without this woman. They all thought I was lucky. Sometimes. I thought so too. If everyone says you're happy, you start to doubt your own sadness. The first time I felt something was wrong, it was small. Marcus started taking his phone everywhere. To the bathroom. To the shower. Even when he just went to throw out the trash. At first, I joked, "Wow, did your phone become your second wife?" He laughed and said, "No, baby, I just need it for work." Clients never sleep, but his clients suddenly started sending messages at midnight and 3 in the morning and at 5 a.m. on Sundays. Whenever the screen lit up, he would flip the phone face down, every single time. Then the lies started getting more creative. One night he came home with cologne I didn't recognize and a tiny lipstick stain on his sleeve. When I pointed at it, he just rolled his eyes. "Maya, that's from the woman at the dry cleaners." She got too close. You see ghosts in everything. I didn't argue. But I felt something inside my chest tighten, like a fist slowly closing. One evening, while we were watching a movie, his phone buzzed. A message popped up with just a heart emoji and the words, "Did you get home safely?" I froze. Before I could read the sender's name, Marcus grabbed the phone and smiled. "Babe, don't be creepy. It's just work," I said quietly. "Since when do your clients send hearts?" He paused the movie. The smile disappeared. His eyes got cold. "Maya, you're doing it again," he said. "You always twist things. You're paranoid. You know my mother was like that too. Is that what you want to become?" My stomach dropped. I hated being compared to his mother. He knew that. He kept going. "You need therapy, not my phone. I can't live with this level of mistrust." By the end of the night, I was the one apologizing. I told him I would work on my jealousy. I remember going to bed thinking, maybe he's right. Maybe I am too sensitive. From that night on, it became a pattern. If I asked why he came home late, he'd say, "You're imagining problems again." If I said he'd promised to help with Daniel's homework, he'd answer, "I never said that." "You're misremembering things, Maya." If I started crying, he'd whisper, "See? This isn't normal. I'm worried about your mental health." Little by little, I stopped trusting my own memory. I started writing small things down in a notebook. What time he left, what he said, what we agreed on. But even then, when I checked the notebook later, I thought, maybe I exaggerated. Maybe it really wasn't that bad. Maybe I wrote it down wrong. That's what emotional manipulation does to you. You start doubting the only thing you have left, your own mind. He even used my past against me. One day I forgot to pick up dry cleaning because Daniel had a fever and I rushed him to the doctor. Marcus looked at me and said calmly, "This is exactly what I mean. Normal people don't forget basic things. You're getting worse. Normal people." That phrase stayed in my head all day like an echo. We even tried couples therapy once. Or, better. I begged him to come, and he agreed just so he could look like the reasonable one. In the session, he told the therapist, "Maya is a good woman, but she invents things. She accuses me of cheating without a single proof. She forgets conversations and then blames me." I sat there, frozen, my hands sweating. When I tried to speak, my voice shook. I sounded exactly like the unstable wife he described. On the way home, he smiled and said, "You see? Even the therapist thinks you're overreacting." The therapist hadn't said that. But I was so confused, I started wondering if I had heard the session wrong. One day, our son Daniel came into the bedroom while I was folding laundry. He climbed on the bed, hugged my arm, and said, "Mom, why are you always sad after Dad leaves the room?" I tried to smile. "I'm not sad, baby. I'm just tired." He shook his head. "Dad says you forget things all the time, but I remember. You told him yesterday you needed the car today. He said you never told him. But I was right there, Mom. I heard you." I stopped folding the clothes. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it. If Daniel remembered, maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe someone was making me feel crazy on purpose. That night, after I put Daniel to bed, I sat in the dark kitchen with my phone. I typed "making someone feel crazy on purpose" into the search bar. The word that kept appearing was gaslighting. I read story after story that sounded exactly like my life, twisting facts, making the victim doubt their memory, calling them crazy, dramatic, too emotional. I read about people who started recording conversations just to check what had really been said. People who apologized for things that never happened. People who thought they were losing their minds until they saw their own reality on playback. I cried silently over the sink. Not because of Marcus, but because for the first time, I had a name for what was happening to me. I decided I needed proof. Not for the police. Not even for a judge. I needed proof for myself. 2 days later, Marcus came home late again. The smell of perfume that wasn't mine hit me before I even saw him. He tossed his keys on the table and said, "Rough day." I'm exhausted. I had already hidden my phone on the shelf, recording audio. My hands were shaking, but my voice was calm. I asked, "Marcus, where were you?" "You said you'd be home by 7. It's almost midnight." He sighed. "Maya, not this again. I told you I was with a client." I looked at his shirt. There was a tiny shimmer of glitter on the collar. We don't have glitter in our home. Daniel is a boy who prefers cars and dinosaurs. I don't even own glitter makeup. I said, "Your client wears glitter now." His face changed instantly. "Here we go," he snapped. "You seriously need help. You build stories in your head. You did the same thing last month." "You're sick, Maya." I answered quietly, "No. I'm just asking." He cut me off. "You're crazy. Do you hear yourself? You're delusional. If you continue like this, I'll take Daniel, and no judge will let him live with a woman who can't even remember what's real." That sentence burned into my brain. I'll take Daniel. He knew exactly where to hit. He didn't say, "We'll fix this." He said, "I'll take him." We went to bed in silence. He fell asleep in minutes. I stared at the ceiling all night, replaying every word. The next morning, after he left for work, I locked myself in the bathroom with my phone. My hands were sweating as I pressed play. I heard my own voice, calm, steady, simply asking where he had been. I heard his voice, sharp, cruel, with no trace of concern. I listened to him call me crazy, sick, delusional. I listened to him threaten to take our son away. But the most important part was something I hadn't even noticed in the moment. At one point, under his breath, he muttered, "If she keeps digging like this, I'm dead with Camilla." Camila. He had never said that name to me before. He didn't know the recorder was on. He had just said the quiet part out loud. I listened to that recording 3 times. With every repetition, something inside me snapped back into place, like a bone finally returning to its correct position. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't forgetful. I wasn't unstable. I was being manipulated. And now I had proof. I didn't confront him that day, or the next, or the week after. Instead, I became very, very polite. I cooked his favorite meals. I laughed at his jokes. I kissed his cheek when he left for work trips. I asked about his clients and smiled when he lied. While he relaxed, thinking he had won, I opened a separate bank account in my name, only transferred small amounts of money every few days so he wouldn't notice, checked our joint account, and took pictures of every suspicious expense. Saved the recording in 3 different places: my phone, a cloud drive, and a USB hidden inside Daniel's old toy, and looked for a lawyer who specialized in psychological abuse and custody. When I played the recording to the lawyer, she didn't look shocked. She just nodded and said, "This is classic. We'll use it." and we'll make sure he doesn't take your son away. That was the first time in months that I felt safe. Not because Marcus had changed, but because I finally had someone on my side who wasn't afraid of his performance. A week later, we went to a family dinner at his sister's house. I almost didn't go, but my lawyer had told me, let people see him. Let them see you. Don't disappear. At the table, his sister asked, smiling, "So, how are you two doing?" Before I could answer, Marcus laughed and said, "Maya's been a bit off lately. Forgetting things, imagining that I'm cheating. You know how emotional she gets." Everyone looked at me with that mix of curiosity and pity. I felt my face burning. In the past, I would have apologized or made a joke about being crazy. This time, I just smiled softly and said, "I'm actually doing much better now that I'm writing things down." He stared at me for a second, confused by my calm tone. He didn't know that every time he humiliated me in public, he was only confirming the story I would later tell in court. The day everything exploded, Marcus chose it himself. He came home smug in a new shirt I had never seen. I smelled a new perfume again, something floral and cheap. He sat me down at the table and said, "I've been thinking. This isn't working. You're too unstable." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, there were divorce papers he had already signed. "I want full custody of Daniel," he said. "You can see him sometimes when you get better. I already talked to a lawyer. You have no serious job, no assets. You don't stand a chance." I almost laughed, because by then my own lawyer was waiting in a cafe 2 streets away, with copies of the recording and of every humiliating message he had ever sent me. I looked at him and asked, "Are you sure you want to do this today?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" I smiled for the first time in a long time. "Because if we're finally being honest, then I have something to play for you." I took out my phone and placed it on the table. His eyes followed every movement. I pressed play. The kitchen filled with his own voice. The insults, the threats, the name Camila, the promise to take Daniel from his crazy wife. He went completely pale. "Where did you get that?" he whispered. I answered, "From the night you came home covered in glitter. Remember? You said I was imagining it." He tried to grab the phone, but I pulled it back. "Marcus, this recording is already with my lawyer," I said calmly. "And with my sister. And in a cloud. Even if you smash this phone, your own words are safe." He started talking fast. Okay, maybe I said some things in anger, but you know I love you, right? We can delete it, we can work this out." For the first time, I interrupted him. "No, we can't. Because I finally remember who I am when you're not rewriting my reality." 2 months later, we sat across from each other in a small courtroom. He looked tired now. The charm was gone. He had brought a lawyer who tried to paint me as emotional, unstable, dangerous. They said I had episodes, that I invented stories, that I was obsessed with his phone. They even tried to use my notebook against me. They held it up and said, "See? She writes everything down because she can't trust her memory." My lawyer didn't flinch. She just pressed play. The judge listened in silence. At some point, she raised her eyebrows. When the recording reached the part where Marcus said he would take Daniel because no judge would give him to a crazy woman, the judge actually laughed softly and said, "Well, I'm glad you think so highly of my profession, Mr. Collins." He sank into his chair. "In the final decision," the judge said, "this recording shows a pattern of psychological manipulation and intimidation. I see no evidence of instability from Mrs. Collins. On the contrary, I see a woman who started recording because she was afraid of losing her son to someone abusing her trust. I was granted primary custody of Daniel. Marcus received limited visitation, supervised at first. On the way out of the courtroom, he tried one last time. He leaned in and whispered, 'You ruined my life.' I looked at him and answered, 'No, you recorded it yourself. I just pressed play.' The night after the court hearing, I came home, put Daniel to bed, and sat alone in the kitchen. The apartment was quiet. No buzzing phone flipped face down, no voice calling me crazy. I opened my notebook, the one where I had started writing everything down. This time, I didn't write what Marcus said. I wrote what I knew. I am not crazy. My memory is valid. When something feels wrong, I am allowed to question it. I copied one last sentence from the recording onto the page. If she keeps digging like this, I'm dead with Camila. Then I closed the notebook and whispered to myself, "You were right to dig, Maya. Because in the end, one small recording didn't just save my custody case. It saved my sanity. And if someone ever makes you feel crazy for noticing what doesn't add up, remember this: healthy love doesn't need to erase your memory to survive.